Community Development Services. Review presentation on draft update to the South Yuba Drainage Master Plan.
Good morning, Mike Lee again, Public Works. The South Yuba Drainage Master Plan was last updated in 1992, and since that time, many of the significant projects that were recommended in that study have been implemented. And so a little under a year ago, we embarked on really to update that plan. We entered into a contract with MHM, local engineering firm, and today we're excited to bring the draft report and presentation to put in front of you. And so with us today we have Sean Menard and Steve Klein, both of MHM, and they will be presenting this draft update to you.
Chair, members of the board, I'm Sean Menard with MHM Engineering, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of the South Yuba Drainage Master Plan. The South Yuba Drainage Master Plan, as you know, is kind of developed over the years. The first study was done in 1981, and an update was done in 95, and this is what we call this the 2012 update. The basic purpose of this update is to update the previous studies, assess the impacts of future development, and delineate any drainage improvements we need to move forward. Some of the intended purposes of this master plan is to help planning in the future, future right-of-way acquisitions for improvements for pipes, roadways, ditches and canals, future grant applications where we try to get some of these improvements paid for through grants. Engineering design, so when there's a subdivision within this area, they can use this information to develop the subdivision design. And then land development support, and then probably most importantly, develop a nexus study so they can figure out the cost of the infrastructure, and then as development goes, properly charge each individual project for development within that area. In the background, the Oliver's Interceptor project, some of the things that prompted this update, there's numerous things that occurred since the 95 study. In 1995, we completed the Oliver's Interceptor project. Actually, it started in 93 and completed essentially in 98. Improved levee downstream on the WPIC and the Bear River setback. The way that affected this project, it lowered the water surface in the WPIC, which has upstream effects all the way up to Hamilton-Smartsville Road. Then also within the community of Olivehurst, the South Olivehurst detention pond and pumping station were constructed. Some other items that were Edgewater subdivision was not fully completed, but came to life in the Orchard subdivision in Montrose, and then the Edgewater pond was constructed, and then also within the Orchard subdivision there was a detention pond and pump station put in. That'll be one of the goals, to try to get rid of that pump station within that pond. And some other smaller subdivisions are the D'Antoni Ranch, the College View Estates, and the Sierra Vista. As you know, there's many other approved tentative maps within this area that didn't go forward in the housing boom, but they're still on the paper, and this will address those areas too. Some of the goals will to integrate previous hydraulic studies during the implementation of the Oliver's Interceptor. We did numerous reports. We also did a FEMA LOMAR in this area. We took all that information and combined it with the previous South Yuba Drainage Master Plans and incorporated it into this revision. We developed future hydraulic models. Identified an alternative drainage product to provide for adequate storm drainage. Identified and minimize, with the goal to minimize O&M within the county and costs. And that we already mentioned it served as a nexus study for future impact fees. And then a guide for future right-of-way, so when you have a project, you can acquire the right-of-way or require subdivisions to dedicate it as they develop. The study area is expanded since the previous 1995 study. And what we've done is, the area in red is the East Linda Specific Plan area, but the area in black is essentially the same area as the levee impact fee that we developed with Trillia. And so basically we tried to make our boundaries coincide with the hydraulics from the levee improvements and drainage improvements. So we've incorporated that area. So to the west, it's the railroad and 784 is the boundary. To the south, it's Reeves Creek. And to the north, it's the upper Yuba levee. The existing floodplain, as you see here, there's numerous areas that are flooded. Basically, I should have mentioned this earlier, one of the goals when we were doing this is we used Earl Road as the dividing line for this current study. We assumed all the development occurred north of Earl Road at this time. So, except for the lack of early, there's about 200 acres of commercial development south. But the Woodbury project, as many of you know, we didn't assume that was being developed for residential development at this time. We did look at that, so the infrastructure we do develop will coincide with that in a later date. We had, as engineer for Woodbury at one time, we had come up with a plan, so we know what needs to be done there, but to include that now would make the impact fees for the East Linda area much higher than they need to be. And so Woodbury should stand on its own as well as East Linda Specific Plan area. You can see there's some flooding along Griffith Road, or Griffith Avenue. There's the Butler property, located just south of Hamilton Smartsville, has some flooding along Hamilton Smartsville. And then there's an area just south of Yuba College. Stated earlier, this is the East Linda Specific Plan, and the area south of Earl Road is that mixed use commercial area. And our goal is to include that into this plan as part of the original or the initial phases. Alternate A, we developed 3 alternative designs to address the infrastructure on this project. Alternate A drains most of the central East Linda Specific Plan area underground to the Orchard Pond, following in a pipeline following the Goldfields Parkway. We take the Orchard Pond and we connect it to the Olivehurst Interceptor. We intercept the drainage at near Griffith and Linda Avenue and tie it into the Olivehurst drain, or the Olivehurst Interceptor, and then go to that Orchard detention pond and you convert that pump station and take one of the pumps away and make it a redundant pump. And then at the southern end of that commercial area, I call it the Lack and Hurley property. I'm not sure if that has another name, but that's how I've always known it as. But we propose a detention pond at the southern end of that to mitigate the downstream flows. You incorporate all those improvements, the residual floodplain looks as you see here. It solves some of the drainage along Griffith Avenue, basically everything south of Linda Avenue. It allows development of, it's hard to see because this reflects undeveloped conditions to developed conditions, and it retains all the stuff in the channel. So if you developed it without doing any infrastructure, the floodplain would have got larger. So it's kind of, there's more storage here than it was previously, and more benefit you really see. South of Earl Road, you can see it on the Woodbury project, the rice fields are still flooded. And along Hamilton Smartsville, we can't solve all those areas, so there's still residual floodplain along that Hamilton Smartsville. Alternate B is an infrastructure plan. We do the same thing with the Orchard Pond. We connect it to the Olivehurst Interceptor. We intercept the Olivehurst drain near Griffith and Linda Avenue. We convert the Orchard pump station to one pump. Basically, it's a nuisance pump, and that lowers the O&M for the county and overall cost. We drain central East Linda, utilizing a linear detention pond basically running parallel to Coalfields Parkway. We do some miscellaneous road crossings along that detention pond. And along Hamilton Smartsville, we provide at least up to 7 culverts at key locations to solve the drainage issues. The residual floodplain on this one is we eliminate the same area along Griffith Avenue. As you can see on the Butler property, which is just south of Hamilton Smartsville, the residual floodplain is greatly reduced. The future high school site is essentially out of the floodplain except the canal that goes through it. The floodplain along Hamilton Smartsville is reduced, and the area, the right side south of Royal Road, because of the benefits upstream, reduce that flooding downstream. Alternate C. This is the floodplain. You notice a lot of the features are the same. We connect the Orchard Pond to the Oliver's Interceptor, connect the water on the Oliver's Drain on Griffith Avenue into the Linden Drain, at Linden Avenue into the Oliver's Interceptor. We convert the Orchard pump station to one operational pump again. We drain most of East Linda Pacific Plant area, utilizing the Linda detention pond adjacent to the future Coalfields Parkway. And we have numerous infrastructure along that underneath Northfield Road and some other roads in that area. We improve the culverts along Hamilton Smartsville in the upper Oliver Drain, and along Griffith Avenue, the Oliver Drain there too. We construct a 6-acre, 4-foot deep pond on the western Butler property, and we eliminate there's currently a culvert, or not a culvert, a drainage ditch on the south end of the Country Club subdivision. It's a nuisance to the county for maintenance. It's landlocked now, and the goal here would be to eliminate that facility, and that's part of this alternate. With those improvements, you can see the residual floodplain, especially within the East Linda Pacific Plant, is isolated to the channels and canals. So this is the, you'll see this is going to be our recommended plan because it accomplishes all the goals to allow all the development in East Linda. Rough cost breakdowns, alternate A is about $5.8 million. Alternate B is just a little under $5 million. And alternate C is $6.2 million. Even though it's the most expensive alternate, the cost-benefit ratio is the highest. So that leads us to our summary and recommendations. So based on everything we've looked at on this project, we recommend that the county would adopt alternate C as the recommended plan and use that for any future nexus studies and future planning and infrastructure requirements of any developer in the East Linda Pacific Plan. And those are the listed there are some of the key features. Alternate B, it's the lowest cost, and it also provides a smooth transition to alternate C. So it's a favorable plan, but it doesn't allow you to develop all of the East Linda Pacific Plan areas. So even though it's desirable from a low cost standpoint, I think you'd be shortchanging yourself if you adopted this plan with your impact fees and then not be able to develop all of East Linda Pacific Plan. So it is a possibility, but we would recommend you go with alternate C. Alternate A is a medium cost, low benefit. We looked at different alternatives. It's always required in any environmental document. But there are some things in this one that may stand out to the desire of the county, such as the trunk line versus the open channel next to the Coalfield Parkway. It channelizes it or pipes it in an underground pipeline. I know in some communities, open channel ditches are not very desirable because of the nuisance with children, kids, and garbage being dumped. So you may want to go hybrid that feature in A as part of C, but overall we would recommend alternate prepping the plan. So, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Questions from the board?
Chair, Sean, I figure you must be a great supporter of government. We're giving you something to do when you're not building subdivisions or master plan communities any longer. So that's the way around. I'm a supporter of alternative C. In fact, I hope one day it's not just a nuisance for children, it's the value of properties. I mean, I'd love to see 100% of our culverts and ditches that are in front of residential communities ultimately, covered, put underground, and modernized. It's an order that we're going to be under for a long time in this community. I guess the first question that came to mind was if there's an overlay of what those flood maps looked like in our 1992 condition, what we've come to, and then what we'll be able to achieve by 2022, or whatever it is that this plan arrives at its destination. It's 100% dependent on development. Kevin, do you think the grants will really step up and close the gap a little sooner? Because I think it's a worthy investment. I guess you could answer. I have one more question, but here.
Well, I would think most of the times the grant programs are based on helping existing plans come out of the floodplain. I don't see many grants out there that benefit future development. So the areas where I see the main benefit is where it benefits homeowners along like Griffith Avenue that are currently flooded. The area's already developed out. So I don't think you can get the whole project covered in the grant, but I definitely think you get portions of it. Griffith Avenue is one area. There's some areas along Hamilton Smartsville where it's developed. So you probably turn in grant applications keying on certain areas where the cost-benefit ratio removes existing homeowners out of the floodplain. Now, if you try to focus on taking the Butler property and shrinking the residual floodplain there for the sole benefit of development, usually doesn't rank very high. But so I think this is a prime example of areas where you could get a grant. I see Griffith Avenue and along Hamilton Smartsville as some areas that would be key.
Yeah, a great contribution. Under the Nexus study, do we reach a point where if we do all of these improvements that sets the stage and the follow-through that comes to mind for me is, do we then go to 784 and talk about their mitigation requirements and policies? Because if we've addressed a good share of those, it's an investment in infrastructure, that we then challenge those special districts to reduce their demands because we're meeting them. And then we encourage economic development. I mean, it's a big incentive for me to work on infrastructure in this fashion and go all the way out, because it really accelerates the ability for the economy to pick up on its own. So, do we remove some of those blocks?
This plan, one of the reasons it was originally developed in 1981 is the South Yuba Drainage Master Plan area is totally independent of 784. So really, you receive no benefit by solving the drainage in this area within 784 and vice versa. This plan originally in 81 and 95 benefited the community of Olivehurst because it diverted the water around Olivehurst. And by virtue of solving the drainage in East Linda, benefited Olivehurst. But there is no direct benefit to 784 on this project.
Okay.
There's some areas where we can incorporate a relationship, for instance, the Edgewater Pond. There's a way maybe to, that's like the dividing line between 784 and what I call the South Yuba Drainage Master Plan area, is where you can use that as a dual use. 784 could use that pond as well as this area, and maybe there could be a O&M cost share of that pond or something like that. But otherwise, they're totally two separate benefit areas.
So, if I had to re-ask the question for my education, so the county is the authority on this then when it comes to mitigation measure?
Absolutely. Let Kevin go more detail.
Got to walk fast.
Yes, good morning, Chair, members of the board, Kevin Allen with Community Development. I want to touch on a point that Sean made just a minute ago. So the Oliver's Interceptor project, one of the primary projects of the South Yuba Drainage Master Plan that was implemented in the 1990s, that essentially cut off the East Linda water that used to flow through Oliver's and caused so much of the drainage problems in Oliver's. So that was key through this update to demonstrate that, and we did a subsequent, the detention base in the south end of Oliver's, and then a letter of map revision for the entire Oliver's area. And by accomplishing those projects, we essentially solved the 100-year floodplain issues for the majority of Oliver's. And now it's down to more localized, street flooding and that type of thing. But as far as the FEMA maps go, we've accomplished quite a bit in Oliver's. And so this South Yuba Drainage Master Plan pulls back and refocuses primarily on the East Linda area, because that's where the remaining residual floodplain issues are. And so I'm getting to my point here in a minute. On the impact piece. So now we've refocused and we're down to a plan. It's a $6.2 million plan. We still have several thousand homes to develop in the East Linda area that we'll be able to spread that cost over. And so we'll have an impact fee program that, when we prepare the Nexus study, that it'll have a reasonable impact fee associated with development in that area. And so kind of how that correlates to RD-74, they've done a similar, comprehensive study of what they need to do their drainage improvements to serve the areas of West Linda down to the Plumas Lake area or Boga area, and spread those costs over future development. Unfortunately, RD-784's costs versus who they can spread those costs over ends up with a higher fee per unit than what we're going to have in East Linda. It's no fault of 74, it's just the realities of the infrastructure that's needed to serve, like for instance, the airport area. There's a fairly large price tag associated with the drainage improvements needed to serve that area. There's not that much development left to spread the cost over. And so that is a challenge that the county and the special districts face, is how do we get those fees down to a reasonable level, considering the drainage impacts and the amount of infrastructure that's needed.
So you're saying the drainage design that sits around the airport at this time is inadequate for the businesses in the airport? We need to further invest to add more to the existing design?
Yes, and it's not so much on the airport itself, it's where the airport's water goes when it leaves the site. Sean can probably touch on it for you, but that's where the main problem is.
The master plan that's out there is accurate. The infrastructure needs to be constructed in accordance with that master plan. There's, for instance, the lower area, the south end of the airport is in the 100-year floodplain. Even though they resolved the levee issue, there's some residual floodplain within the basin. And in order to get those areas out of the floodplain, some additional infrastructure has to be constructed in accordance with the master plan out there. Just like we see here. Now, if we adopt this, we'll have a master plan here. It doesn't solve it will solve Griffith Avenue area, but you haven't built it. So we're in kind of the same situation. And one of the reasons this infrastructure is only $6.2 million is the county's been very good at getting grants for this area. The Oliver's Interceptor project was essentially built out with grants. If this plan would still have the Oliver's Interceptor and the South Oliver's Detention Pond and Pump Station in it, the price would be $30 million, and your infrastructure costs would be similar to what they were before, or what they were in 784.
That's a good point.
I just want to comment because there's this plan here there's a lot of work involved in this, and it's good to see it. It doesn't get front page, notoriety, but it certainly is very, very important at upgrading this. And as it's stated in the staff report, over the last 10 years, Oliver's has been a benefit, from these projects that we've seen, with the South Detention Basin, the Western Interceptor, what this value does to the people who live in these areas. And I'll be specific to Oliver's, because hundreds of homes in the Oliver's area were under a mandatory flood insurance program, not because of the levees, but because of the drainage. A lot of folks don't understand. They say, well, there are levees that are improved, but I'm still on that mandatory flood zone. The reason why is because you have a lack of drainage. So this This document here, specifically for Linda, is really important to the folks out there. Those dollars that are spent on mandatory flood insurances instead can be spent on their own uses, such as Linda, such as all of us. It was an important, projects that we took on in regards to making sure that they had adequate drainage. But it was really a great timing, and I know Kevin and I worked on this project to take the south drainage detention basin from the county to Three Rivers, because that's where the bulk of the money was coming from, was through those programs to improve the levees. So just want to say thank you for the good work, and I just really think that with this plan in place that we'll see, these projects. I support C as well. And I guess my question is this, is that because those infrastructure dollars are so few and far between, do you have a phased-in approach with the Plan C?
Yeah, the whole entire plan can be phased, and then we looked at different phases. For instance, there's some thought that this high school site along Hamilton, Marshall, may go sooner than other portions. We did some quick calculations, and we determined roughly what infrastructure would be done consistent with the plan. And so, yes, it could be phased, and you'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, because it depends on where you are in the watershed. But we do now have to act on
The other question I have is, when you talk about piping the water, I know a lot of that water through the open ditches recharges our water aquifers, and has that been taken in consideration when you talk about piping that water down?
Oh, there's definitely benefits to having open channels, such as groundwater recharge,
Okay.
versus O&M, maintenance issues, health and safety issues. So again, each jurisdiction has to weigh what they'd like to see. I know Sutter County, within the urban areas, they prefer to pipe it. It's very costly, but the O&M and the cost of trash getting thrown into those ditches far outweighs the benefit of having groundwater recharge. So you got to look at it on a case-by-case basis. That's why we have alternate C without that pipe scenario, but you have to look at the case.
And I just want to say to the airport issue, and I'm sure you're familiar with this more than I am, Sean, is on the highest priority for 784 in regards to getting those projects completed. I know that there would be a benefit for the folks in the south area of Butterfly and Buttercup and the far end there, that they are looking for that, that project to be done as well. I think there's a benefit for those homes as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, 784 is kind of off this subject, but 784 is looking at doing the pump station down there to help resolve that area. It won't completely resolve it, but it will drastically help. And I mean, it's hard to tell someone you used to have 6 foot of water, now you only have 2 foot of water, but it helps a lot. Because everybody upstream will some people will be left dry, so it does help.
Thank you.
Any other comments? So are you saying this is all for future development, or are there some projects that are needed now, the way the situation is right now?
This is full encompassing, includes future development, and also helps resolve some areas that, and it's more infill projects, but it does include some. I use Griffith Road or Griffith Avenue as an example. It's between Northville Road and Pearl Road. It's there's a lot of homes in there, and it floods, and so it does address existing residences also.
And obviously the flooding just from rainwater, that's what we're trying to deal with here, rainwater,
This is all internal drainage, yes.
internal drainage. That's not-
No levee breaks or.
It has nothing to do with the levee breaks, having water with the levee break. That's a different problem.
That's a different issue.
Different issue, right?
And actually, some of this information is used when they do certify the levees, that you have to have an internal drainage plan. And this will be part of the certification for the levy that's part of SB 5, so you can develop into future.
Through the chair, my next comment, I guess, is for Kevin, is this is a draft, and so you're asking the board to take a preference in regards to what alternative you'd like to look at. And then is there any public workshops on this? Is there a public hearing? What's the next step?
Yeah, I was going to go talk about that. it was intended really today to be one of the public workshops. And we've put it in the newspaper and on our website, and we're soliciting comments through the end of this month. Today was to present to the board and the public, ask for comments or concerns or issues if you want anything addressed. And then it will be brought back to the board in June for formal adoption.
Okay, so no requirements for any votes today, just to,
That's correct, just seeking your input and if you have comments. And then we'll bring back the final draft in June.
very good, thank you.
So then we don't need to vote on anything. Not
And
looking-
just,
not looking for-
vote, if there's additional input, if certain board members like different alternatives, and we would certainly like to hear that. Or if there's a consensus that alternative C is the one for our recommendation, then, we're glad to hear that as well.
Through the chair, I have one final comment, and that is in regards to a lot of the water that's coming from the East Linda area, does have an effect on Reed's Creek. And so, I know we've had some problems, some issues over there. Is this going to relieve, the Madge Avenue, issues out there with Reed's Creek?
I'll let Sean
The
start.
goal of the study was not to, whatever historically comes off this area or watershed remains the same or lower, the peak flow. And that's been accomplished with all the modeling and the improvements that we proposed. So the peak flow off this site does not increase the downstream flooding. As for Madge Avenue, that was part of one of the previous South Yuba Drainage Master Plans. And they were going to put a levee, actually as part of the South Olivers Detention Pond project. They were going to continue to levee all the way around and connect it into high ground by Rancho Road, essentially. And it was determined the cost benefit ratio wasn't there. And Yuba County submitted a grant after the 97 floods, if you recall, some of you were there. And they denied it, but they provided a grant to all homeowners that wanted to elevate their homes at that time. So from that aspect, a lot of those homes also have flow easements on the properties. So we didn't propose any addition, we didn't re-propose the levy. It didn't have a cost benefit ratio then, and so with flow easements on those properties and people that being offered the ability to raise their homes, we felt that addressed that area.
Yeah, there was about 3 of the homeowners that were closest to Reed's Creek that took advantage of that. And there still is water, on some of these particular storms, that there's a lot of water coming through that system. If there's beavers out there that dam up that particular area, it does cause a problem. I just didn't know if there was going to be a more of an impact downstream or not. And you're saying that they won't have anything over and above what they have currently right now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And I hit on it early in this presentation. The situation for those folks at Nash Avenue has been improved. When they did the Bear River setback levy, they lowered the water surface in Bear River. So theoretically, they won't lower their water. Again, that wasn't part of our study, but do the math. They did receive benefit from that project.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, could we ask for consensus on alternative C for the board? Can we ask for a consensus for
Okay,
alternative C?
you be happy with the consensus? Okay,
I like to.
okay. Well, I think we're all in favor of proceeding. Okay, that's all you need?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on then to